The bed was creaking as he turned over onto the other side. This old iron bed, with a mattress that smelled horrendous, has been his bed for the past 15 years. But tonight is his last night sleeping in it. He will be a free man tomorrow. Ben could not believe that this was happening. After spending so many years in prison, the time has finally come for him to go home. But where is home? His wife left him shortly after he was found guilty. His son wants nothing to do with him. He does not even know if his family still lives in their old house. Cindy has probably sold it by now. Too many memories in there. He sighed heavily, knowing that his future was so uncertain. One thing was for sure, though. Someone else committed the crime he was accused of. And Ben was determined to find those responsible and clear his name. He lost everything and will stop at nothing to bring the real criminal to justice. When he woke up the following day, Ben was ready to leave that place and never come back. There was a sign of great disappointment on his face when he exited the prison, only to find out that no one had come. As he walked down the street, Ben could feel that a car was slowly driving behind him. He started walking faster and realized the vehicle started moving more quickly. "What am I afraid of?" he asked himself, feeling he had nothing to lose. Ben stopped walking and decided to see who was in that car. With the window rolled down, the vehicle slowly approached him. An unfamiliar face stared at him for a while before finally saying something Ben thought he would never hear. "Hello, Ben. You don't know me, but I surely know you. And there is something else I do know. You were imprisoned for someone else's crimes. Don't you think it's time to find out what happened that night?" When the initial shock wore off, Ben nodded his head. "I don't know where to start looking," said Ben. "I hardly remember anything that happened that night." The man in the car looked at Ben, deciding whether to believe his words or not. Ben realized that the man had doubts, so he told him he had a few drinks that night because his family was celebrating Cody's birthday. Cody was Ben's son, who had already finished college by now and was working as a teacher at the local high school. One of the things that Ben did remember was the smell of burning flesh and screams. He remembered hearing someone scream in agony, but he was trapped under a pile of rubble and could not help anyone. He also remembered blazing flames coming from all sides. That was it. He had been trying for years, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not remember anything else. The man in the car looked at Ben and told him the answers lay with him. He has to look hard and deep enough to find them. Then he rolled up his window, and the car slowly drove away. Ben was even more confused now. The answers lie with him? What does that even mean? How does this man expect him to remember that night when he has been trying to do that for the past 15 years? Without even realizing it, Ben arrived at their house. The house he and Cindy bought after they got married. The house where Cody grew up. And also the house where he was arrested in the middle of the night. This was the last place he was happy. The last place he felt safe, loved. He had no idea what to expect as he slowly walked toward the front door. Was this still even his house? Does Cindy still live here? Or did she and Cody move elsewhere? The door slowly opened, and there she was, beautiful as ever, with her long brown hair and big green eyes, his Cindy. "Hi," said Ben, his voice trembling and his eyes filled with tears. "What are you doing here?" asked Cindy. Ben told her he got released today and had no place to go. You can't stay here," said Cindy. "Cody is coming over later," she added. Ben knew that his son hated him, and Cindy could see how devastated her ex-husband was. Despite everything, she never stopped loving him. However, Distancing herself from him was the only thing she could do since her son was labeled as the son of a murderer and therefore targeted by bullies at school. "Here's some money. Check yourself into a motel, and we will try to figure something out," Cindy said softly. "I will correct this, find out who killed her, and clear my name," said Ben. Cindy shook her head and told Ben to leave the past in the past. Their lives are already ruined enough, and there is no need to complicate things more. After checking into the motel, Ben started thinking about that night. There were bits and pieces scrambled in his head, but he has not been able to put them together. He wanted to remember so severely, but he had made no progress in the past 15 years. It was already late, so Ben decided to get some sleep and start looking for answers in the morning. The next day, he decided to go to the library and use the computer. He could see people staring at him and hear them whispering as he walked down the street. He was guilty in their eyes, and no one wanted him around. Ben was heartbroken to see some of his former friends pass him by without saying a word. He was like a stranger in his hometown, a town where he grew up, got married, and started a family. A familiar face greeted him at the library. Cindy was working here even before they met. "Are you following me?" she asked with a smile. Ben smiled and told her that he had come here to use the computer. Their conversation was brief and formal, but Ben could feel that Cindy suffered too. He had no idea where to start, what to even search for, so he tried searching for her name, Allison Myers. There were several news articles, all featuring her picture, the victim. Her brown eyes stared at him from the screen as he realized he almost forgot what she looked like. Next picture, him, the killer. Every article he read said pretty much the same thing. He attacked her, drugged her, and wanted to force himself onto her. However, when he realized he had given her too many drugs, he decided to burn the body and the house, leaving as little evidence as possible. Ben kept reading and reading. Even though he could not remember what had happened, he knew he could not do something like that. Why would he? He had a loving wife, a great kid, and a wonderful life. Why would he go and attack this girl? Nothing made sense to Ben. He then decided to check some articles about memory loss. During his search, he came across the term suppressed memories. As he was reading, Ben realized that this might be what happened with his memory. Due to immense trauma, his brain protected him by blocking those memories. After hours of reading about suppressed memories, Ben decided it was time to head back to the motel. He waved at Cindy and headed out. There was one thing he read about suppressed memories that kept bugging him. In theory, suppressed memories can often be recovered with the help of a trigger. So now, he has to find out what could help him trigger his memory. He could not sleep that night. A million thoughts raced through his head, but the main question was always the same. What is his trigger? He kept thinking and thinking until he concluded that it was time to visit the crime scene. Ben woke up very nervous. Having doubts about his theory, he decided it was still worth a try. After all, he had absolutely nothing left to lose. His heart raced and the taxi slowly pulled over in front of the house. He was there. This is where it happened. This is where his life changed forever. Ben could not believe his eyes. It had been 15 years, but the house was still there. What was left of the house anyway? Once a lovely home was a pile of rubble and black from all the damage the fire caused. Slowly, Ben walked toward the house. The upper floor was destroyed, so he started exploring the ground floor. There was a yellow police tape on the floor saying, "Crime scene, do not cross." As he walked around, Ben still had no memory of the events there that evening. Then he reached a pile of rubble that used to be the stairs leading to the first floor. He suddenly felt fear, and his heart started racing like crazy. He heard screams, begging for help. The pieces in his head slowly started coming together. It was a lovely summer night. Ben and Cindy surprised their son Cody because it was his birthday. They were having a good time, a few friends came over, and it was a great evening. After the party, Ben decided to go for a walk, as he felt he had too much to drink and wanted to clear his head. He was walking for a while when he ran into Allison. They did not know each other, even though they lived pretty near. Ben saw Allison carrying many bags, so he offered to help. They got to her house, and he had the bags inside. Allison thanked him, and the doorbell rang just as he left the house. Ben saw Allison's face change in an instant. She looked utterly terrified. Ben then remembered that the man at the door just broke in and started yelling at Allison. He suddenly stopped when he saw Ben, but then he came at him and hit him in the head. Then it all went black for a few minutes. When he arrived, Ben heard Allison begging the man to leave her alone and stop hurting her. The man told her that leaving him was a mistake and now she would face the consequences. Allison replied that no one would believe she died of an overdose since she never did drugs. The man laughed and told her there would not be a body to do an autopsy on because he would burn her. Allison started crying, and Ben lost consciousness again. By the time he woke up, the house was already on fire. He could hear Allison calling for help, but Ben realized he was lying under a pile of rubble. This is where the stairs used to be. This is where the man tied him. Ben felt his hands were not tied anymore. The man probably untied him before he left, and Ben now realized precisely why he did that. There was now no evidence suggesting that Ben was just a friendly neighbor who found himself at the wrong place at the wrong time. Ben would become the prime suspect of the crime if anything went wrong, and that is exactly what happened. Police found no evidence of any other person being at the house at the time of the crime. There was just Ben, with no alibi or memory of what happened, until today. But who is this man? Will anyone believe him? Having his memory back, Ben realized it was time to go back to the motel and decide what to do next. As he was leaving the house, he saw that car again. He walked right over. "I remember everything," Ben said. "I believe it was her ex who killed her," he added. The man looked at him, and Ben could see a little smile on his face. "Thank you, Ben. Finally, the time has come for my sister to get the justice she deserves," the man in the car said. Ben was shocked. Her brother? He had no idea she had a brother, but he didn't know anything about her in any way. "What happens now?" Ben asked. "Now you go home and let me handle everything," said Allison's brother. "My name is Steve, by the way, and thank you again. I know you and your family suffered a great deal. I hope it is not too late for you to reconnect with your family. Good luck, Ben," the man said, and then drove off. The following day, everything changed. The news was all reporting the story of a wrongfully convicted man. The real killer was behind bars. It looked like Steve took care of everything. Ben started crying. Tears of joy ran down his face when he heard a knock. As he opened the door, Cindy stood there, his beautiful Cindy. "Can I hug you?" she asked. Ben walked toward her and nodded. 15 years of waiting, 15 years of loneliness, and just one hug filled his heart with immense joy and love. "I should have believed you," Cindy said as she burst into tears. "I understand now. It was a perfect crime with the perfect scapegoat. My memory loss also did not help my case. There were times when I believed I was guilty. I do not blame you. I am happy I could prove my innocence and help find the real killer. Past is in the past now. It is time to start looking into the future. And I would very much like you to be a part of my future," Ben said to Cindy. "I would very much love that too," Cindy replied. The sun was setting when Cindy and Ben arrived at their house. The front door opened, and there was Cody. His eyes were full of tears as he ran over to his dad. No words were necessary, and Ben just hugged his son. Everything was okay now. He was home with his wife and son. It took him 15 years, but he was finally free. The city had always been reminiscent of romance and love. It always smelled of croissants and coffee in the morning. There were shops with fragrant flowers on the streets. It was along these French streets that Gerald rode to school, then to university on his bicycle. He had a good and wealthy family. The parents loved each other very much. He was the only child in the family. His mom worked as a stylist in a fashion house. She was often approached for advice and services by famous foreign artists. Gerald's father was a jeweler. His work brought a good income. They lived in the city center in a 2-story apartment. Everything went well in their family. When Gerald turned 16, his parents decided to buy him a bike. It had been his dream since his childhood. He never missed a single speedway race. He regularly watched them on the internet. His father sometimes took his son to motorcycle races. No one could have thought that this passion for motorcycles could completely change his fate. One day, as usual, Gerald was returning home from the university on his motorcycle. It was raining cats and dogs. Visibility on the road was poor. The glass on his helmet was heavily fogged up. Without stopping, he tried to rub it with his hand, but that was a big mistake. Gerald skidded and lost control. His motorcycle crashed into a pole standing on the side of the road. When the guy woke up, he was already in the ward of the city hospital. His parents were sitting near him. They looked at their son, barely holding back tears. Their only son was on the verge of life and death. They thought it was their fault and shouldn't have given Gerald the motorcycle at such an early age. According to the law, the rights to motor vehicles were issued until the age of majority, already from the age of 16. And in fact, they considered him still a child. He had little memory of what had happened before the hospital. "Honey, you got into an accident," Mom said in a trembling voice. "How do you feel?" "Where do you hurt?" asked his father. "It hurts everywhere," Gerald said with a smirk, and the parents smiled back. He was a cheerful guy. Gerald never lost his heart. Others could only dream about such an ability, being able to see the problem from the positive side. That accident changed him completely. Gerald's constant mood for the best has sunk into the deep ground. In addition to fractures and abrasions, Gerald's face was severely damaged and disfigured. He was not shown mirrors for a long time to let him recover and not worry ahead of time. He immediately underwent surgery, but it did not significantly change his appearance. When he began to feel better, his parents and the doctor had to tell the young man everything. With that face, he could not measure himself and did not see anything positive anywhere else. His appearance became unrecognizable. How could this happen? Why did they buy a motorcycle for me? Thought Gerald. A few months later, Gerald was discharged. He could walk, eat, and write. He did everything a regular person would do. But his face was not the same. His parents removed all the mirrors in the house. They decided to put it off until Gerald himself would want it. Gerald was often laughed at the university, and he was called a freaky face. Only a few could look into his eyes. It was even worse for the guy. One classmate from the faculty, whose name was Chucky, often bullied Gerald, tossed threatening notes in his locker, tripped him, and called the poor fellow in front of everyone. Gerald felt awkward and flawed, and he could not fight back. Gerald began to walk with his head down, and he grew his hair so that the bangs covered his face. The guy started wearing a bandana on his face's lower part, so he tried to hide his mutilated face. Many teachers have radically changed their attitude towards the young guy. Some began to look at him as an outcast. They often gave terrible marks as the guy stopped answering in the group. He didn't feel like being given special attention. Others began to feel sorry for Gerald, showing his weakness and defenselessness. An intense change in attitude toward the guy were very noticeable. Thus, the guy realized that he would no longer have a life as before, as long as more attention was paid to his face than to himself. One day he came home and told his parents that he wanted to leave the university. "What happened, dear?" Mom asked calmly. "I want to go to a new place." "Which one?" I want to become a plastic surgeon." Mom was surprised by the step of her son, but she did not question him. It all became clear to her. Gerald's face did not give him peace. He wanted to return to his old life by any means. In such a situation, his mother could only support Gerald. "Good. We will discuss your new class with your father in the evening. Since now is the middle of the year, you must go to paid education or wait another year." "Thanks," Gerald said softly. Parents supported their son in everything from an early age, forbade him little, and spoiled him. And finally, the guy was transferred to the University of Surgery. Students' and teachers' attention to Gerald began to be expressed even worse than in the formal educational institution. He was ready for it. It was important for him to achieve his goal, to correct his appearance, to become the same guy from Paris. Some were interested in his appearance. Others, from the point of view of professional interest, wanted to take a closer look at his face hiding under his bandana. And one day, at one of the lessons, plastic surgery professor Mr. Green called Gerald to the blackboard. In front of the whole class, he asked the guy to take off his mask and show his face. Gerald was entirely at a loss. He tried not to look at students and rarely spoke to them after the accident. And even in front of the whole audience of people unfamiliar to him, Will asked him to reveal his face. He stood in front of the class, revealed his face, and silently left the auditorium. Only in the corridor he heard the laughter of the guys and Will's phrase, which sunk right into his heart. "Anything can be done in your situation, bud. I'm sorry, but you'd better open your face up. You won't walk around with a rag on your face all the time," the teacher shouted after him and laughed at his back. Gerald would not have paid any attention to it. He was used to insults and smirks from teachers and students. But he knew that Mr. Green was a professor of medical science who had been involved in surgery for a long time, especially plastic surgery. Namely, Gerald dreamed of studying with Mr. Green. He hoped that he had a chance to correct his appearance. The guy was ready for hundreds of operations. He was ready to go under the knife, even if they threatened his life. He read a lot about Green and his achievements on the internet. Gerald often looked at the before and after photographs of his operations. The people he operated on changed drastically. Gerald's dreams and goals were shattered in an instant. He asked to be transferred to another group, where he could continue his studies. A drop of hope and respect for his parents, who helped him to enter, gave Gerald a reason to continue what he started. In the university cafe, where he usually dined alone, a girl unexpectedly sat next to him. Her name was Lily. "Hi," she said smilingly. "If you came to laugh at me, then please leave," Gerald said. "I was there. Green did a terrible job," she answered. Gerald raised his eyes, and the guy saw how tenderly and with a pure soul the girl looked directly into his eyes. From that moment, Gerald was no longer alone. Lily became friends with him and did not let the guy get offended. Lily gave Gerald a university tour and showed him how everything worked there. Gerald began to study from the very beginning. Their shared interest in surgery brought them together. He became more confident with Lily, and he began to open up. She always protected him and did not give offense. He started to make friends at the university. They looked at the appearance of the guy differently. In the lessons of anatomy, students had to share a lot. Therefore, the guy's face no longer caused much surprise. A couple of months after graduation, they began to train in medical institutions, and Gerald gained experience from excellent doctors. It was interesting for them to work with him, especially to be always together. They became very close with Lily during this time. They didn't get tired of spending days and nights with each other. 5 years later, Lily and Gerald got married. They managed to start their medical institution up. Gerald's parents helped him. Gerald and Lily had recruited a staff of good doctors. Together, they performed operations and Gerald and Lily did what they loved. Of course, Gerald's face also got a lot of work done. He had to undergo several operations, which gradually led to miraculous results. It was impossible to restore the face to the ideal, but it turned out close to it. Gerald's beloved wife and his friend from the faculty worked on it together for long hours. They were aces in their field. Gerald completely trusted his friends. Over time, he no longer had those scars and distorted face. Gerald's sense of awkwardness and shyness vanished with them. He cut his bangs and became proud of their work. It was seen as a fundamental change in him, inside and out. His goal had been achieved. The guy's face was back to normal. All his and Lily's efforts were not in vain. Only one thing did not give him peace. More precisely, one person who once tried to kill his hope. It was Professor Will Green. Many years later, he returned to the university and went to Green's auditorium. He was at his regular lecture. Gerald listened to what the professor was saying to his students. He waited until the end of the lecture and approached Green. "Hello," Gerald said. "Good afternoon. Do I know you, young man?" Green asked. "I was at your lecture once, about 7 years ago. You asked me to come to the blackboard and reveal my face to everyone." Green remembered that unusual guy. He was surprised and couldn't believe his eyes. "Everything you said in lectures is old information. Science and technology have already stepped forward," Gerald said. Will Green was offended and depressed at the same time. His scientific work, applauses, and discoveries were a thing of the past. He was a good surgeon, he thought. The key word was. The same could not be said of Gerald. The fate and strong character of the guy helped him become what he was. The support of friends and relatives gave Gerald hope and incentive to achieve his goals. Saying these words, Gerald left the auditorium with a smile on his face. Green was the one who was standing there, shocked and emerging into his deep silence with a sad, smurfy face.